A bit about yourself, your background, and what brought you here before coming to Woodstock.
I was raised atheist from a more or less communist background, intellectuals from New York City and artists, and became an interfaith minister in '96 in Woodstock, largely with Native American teaching. And I was a member of the Pictures generation of hotshot artists in my 20s, and I went other ways, and a lot of them got famous, and the Metropolitan Museum came looking for me and put me in a show of that group. And I'd done a lot of things. I just do whatever I feel like doing when I feel like doing it. So like a friend of mine and I, and I have this place, The Mothership, which is dedicated to creativity, and I love to support other people's creativity, and I've been doing it all my life pretty much.
Let's take it again.
Involved in music seriously since my teens, and art seriously in my 20s. And then I switched over to music again in my 40s, and also in my spiritual search in my 40s, and became an interfaith minister. My father was in the Navy. We moved to Topeka when I was 7 days old, and my father eventually became a psychiatrist. My mother eventually became an art history teacher. I started playing music pretty seriously when I was in my early teens, and really got into blues, electric blues. I was a lead guitar player, and then I sort of thought I was black, and I wasn't black. And when Black Power happened on the college campus, I switched to art because I just didn't feel like I could genuinely play the blues. So I switched to art. I found art. Art found me, and ran with a fast crowd in New York City in my early 20s. I was an important part of a group of people that really went on to kind of conquer the art world. And but I fell out of that as the music stuff took over again, and I got more interested in music, and then I started having mystical experiences and got more and more interested in spirituality. And so just before I came to Woodstock, I was living in Brooklyn. I was doing healing massage work. And I invented a cat toy. And my interest went toward Native American teaching, and I did end up studying with Native American people, and one of them was a man called Grandfather Thundercloud, who suggested that I move to Woodstock. And he asked me to be his firekeeper at the Wittenberg Center in Bearsville. And that night, you don't let the fire go. You let the fire go out on its own, because the fire is God, basically, in the medicine wheel ceremony. And it wouldn't go out, and I had to go through a whole lot of soul searching, and I knew I was angry, but I couldn't figure out who I was angry at. I'd already worked it out with my father and my mother and therapy and stuff like that. And finally I realized I was angry with God, because it was like life was such a fucking bad joke, because you're gonna have to die. And so I just really realized that I was angry with God, that I was gonna have to die, and this, what was it for anyway? And as soon as I realized that, the fire went out, and I ended up staying overnight there, and the next day meet the boss, and I said, I'm looking for a place in Woodstock. She says, we're looking for an intern. That's how I moved to Woodstock. How did moving to Woodstock affect my life?
Correct.
It was, well, at first, I went back and forth. I had a place in Brooklyn, a really interesting place in Brooklyn, and I got a hold of this very old Volvo, and I was going back and forth. Most of the time I was in Woodstock, and I was living at the Wittenberg Center, so that's a shamanic studies center, and I'm like the guy who's working on the grounds and, you know, sending out the publicity and, parking the cars and stuff like that, and taking a lot of spiritual workshop stuff, sweat lodges and other things. And so that was a big part of my life. Meanwhile, the only way I was making a living was on these cat toys that I had invented and was marketing. So it was like I had that place, and I was always like dealing with people who were making the cat toys for me and stuff. What happened was that eventually they say, you know, like the baby bird gets kicked out of the nest and to learn how to fly. And so I got kicked out of the nest at the Wittenberg Center and moved into Woodstock. And I was becoming, I was very serious at that point I was writing songs. I had already I did an album in '86, an album in '88, an album in '89, and an album in '90. Serious about music, and at that time, this is really before CDs. You could bet that the only people that are going to buy music are about age 14 to 20. You know, those are the people that actually were buying things. That was my theory, because that's when I bought things. And I'm like 40-something, 42 going on 43 when I moved into town. And I didn't move right into town right away. Yeah, that's it, yeah. But I was somehow working, I had my car was working. I was staying, what happened, I got kicked out of the Wittenberg Center. So, but we were recording an album, that was it. We were recording an album, that was the main thing I was doing, Walking in the Days of the Prophecies. And I was very wrapped up in the Native American prophecies and a whole lot of stuff like that. And I was still living in town. I had a friend's place that I was staying at, and going back and forth to the city. But I was just stuck there for a long time. I was working at there was a place called Dharmaware, and Dharmaware was a place that sold ritual objects, Tibetan ritual objects, Tibetan Buddhist, and other things, Hinduist especially, little statues of different god forms and so on, and lots of clothing from Nepal, India, and also from South America. And New Age music. It was kind of like a New Age alternative spiritual supply store, and I was able to establish a little acoustic venue there, and meet a lot of people and play a lot of music. What I did the first time, it was just mainly a clothing store. And I made a deal with the guy that I could go sit there from 4 to 7 every Friday and Saturday and Sunday and just play music. Anyway, I think I'm getting off the subject. Am I getting off the subject? Woodstock affected my life a lot. First of all, it was on the spiritual journey, spiritual search, that I was here at all. So that naturally changes your life. The more of that stuff you do, it changes your life in a good way. Also, it's a little bit of it's definitely a small pool. You can be an active person, you can do things in Woodstock that it's harder to do in New York. Like, I didn't have someplace that I could establish an acoustic venue without spending any money. In Woodstock, I was able to find that. So Woodstock was, for me, also the nature of Woodstock in some way is so ironic because the town, much more then than now, but still now, is famous for something that didn't happen here. So the idea that it happened here, or that this is it, is sort of, it's ironic. And also, the town dynamics are bizarre. Like, there really are, it's kind of like, I think, an Indian reservation where you have two really different forces at work. So here, it was like the people in the town that had power, it was like they wanted to shut down the Woodstock part of Woodstock. You know, like there was a police chief here that was not so, I don't want to mention his name, but they were adopting this policy where if I was an artist and I'm going to have a gig at the Tinker Street Cafe and I staple up a poster on something, maybe a lamppost, maybe a lamppost, right? Then they would give a $50 fine for every poster to the Tinker Street Cafe. And the person who put up the poster had no idea this kind of stuff was going to happen. Plus, they had lots of traffic stops. It was like if you came to Woodstock 3 times to go out and have a fun night, dancing and drive home, if 3 times you don't have a license anymore, you know, it was as if it's always been that way. I've always found that way. It's like you think, like, for example, Hopi Indians. Hopi Indians have a reputation similar to Tibetan Buddhists of being, well, the name itself means people of the peaceful way, but it's not all one thing. There's that, and then there's also, well, we want running water, we want electricity, we want all the modern conveniences, you know. So there are always big divisions, and they're really reasonable when you think of it. Like, I have a friend who came here from the city early on, and she described to me how she was, you know, tripping on acid and went and knocked on somebody's door, like, way out in the country someplace, you know, and, like, you know, wondered why they were so mean to her, you know, all that. So, I mean, what's good about Woodstock, what has been good about Woodstock and in creativity in general is that there's a certain amount of chaos that goes along with that. There's a certain disorder that goes along with creativity. And, you know, there's a lot of people that just want no disorder. They already have too much disorder in their life in some way, and they don't want that. So there's a, you know, that whole thing about, well, like, now I think it's in gender, you know, it's like there's always going to be an area where there's like the people that are a little bit more straight are going to feel like really uncomfortable. And to some extent making people who are sort of on the chimp side of the chimp-bonobo divide, making épater la bourgeoisie was the French art thing, which means, basically it means frighten the comfortable, or it means disgust the bourgeois, the comfortably middle-class people, make them disgusted. So, you know, you have great musicians, and they have absolutely crazy lifestyles, and but also you have a lot of very experimental people here. It was a very experimental place in all kinds of social ways and interesting ways that usually involve something illegal. But like, you know, there were some pretty outrageous shows on the cable TV. There was a guy here named Les Visible who was like constantly, you know, libeling the building inspector and stuff, you know, because he had his house was plumbed with a garden hose, barely buried. Really into the spiritual journey, and then moving into the town. Oh, no, then moving out. it changed my life a lot because as I got more established in my spiritual practice, I really got, largely through my Native American teachers, Grandfather Thundercloud, Beautiful Painted Arrow, and my Hindu teacher, Bhagavan Das, I got into goddess worship, and then that really kind of changed my life. It was almost like it became a fictional story, and I would just basically say yes to these conditions that presented themselves, and like suddenly having twin girls. And to me, it's all been a dance with the goddess, and Woodstock enabled that to happen. And Woodstock has a whole lot of very, I would say, crazy wisdom in the people here, that most of whom are not here anymore. But it's part of the fabric of this place. There's something you could call it magic. There's some magic here, and it's as though this place itself enjoys seeing you enjoy yourself. There's something very benevolent and very supportive about Woodstock, just in the molecules of the place. As far as people, there's all kinds of crazy stuff between people, but there are stories. There are some real stories, and we're made of stories, so that's it. I think my music is influenced by it because I think and it changes over time, but my music is very much influenced by a feeling that happens, that everything is connected, and that happens through the music. I see the trees are listening, I do, and so being out in nature, being in a natural setting has really had a lot to do with that developing a little bit. As far as art, I've always been a quirky artist as far as working. I've never been able to do 9-to-5 art. The only time I ever did anything like 9-to-5 art was the one time I went to an artist colony. And I liked doing 9-to-5 art. I did it for about a month. But generally speaking, I'm like, I'll see something and I'll just do something with it. And that's it. Usually it's like there's virtually no process or not much of a process. And the way I do art now, it's the same as I've always done art. It's just, at some level, it's vandalism. I take something that exists and I mess with it. I've always done that.
That's great.
On my 57th birthday, there was this peculiar guy hanging around. And in those days, everything was illegal. Marijuana was so illegal. But everybody was doing it, and some people were selling it, and so on. So anybody new that came into the crowd, first thing you think is they're a narc. And he looked like a narc anyway. But he was sitting around for a while, and on my birthday he came up to me and he said he was a real estate developer. He had $250,000, and he thought that the value of the Woodstock music scene could be upgraded, and that he could somehow make money by upping the value of Woodstock music scene. And he wanted a base place to do it from. And at this time, I was single parenting 6-year-old twin girls upstairs here at the mothership. And so this space became vacant right at that point. The business that moved out, that was here. And so he rented the place, and we started doing events here. Then hilarious things happened, but the place got shut down in early 2008. No, early 2009, and at that point, I was in a show at the Metropolitan Museum. I had 30 pieces in a show at the Met called The Pictures Generation, And as a result of that, I was able to sell some things, and I was able to then rent this space from the landlord that had been the Woodstock Mothership, it was called at the time. But the owner, the person who was renting it, whose name is Ralph, had left. But I wanted to use it as a studio, so I started renting it. And I did that for a little while until I couldn't afford it anymore. Then the landlord's sister came and lived here. Then the landlord decided to sell the place. Then through a miracle, I ended up owning the place. And then once I owned the place, Airbnb was starting pretty much the exact same time. So I started an Airbnb here on the weekends, and that brought enough money in for me to do programming on the other days and nights. So I did lots and lots of programming, a lot of art stuff, mostly art stuff in the first few years. But that was 2013 and been going ever since. So it's been here 11 years on this streak here. The mothership is, the purpose of the mothership is to encourage and support people to realize themselves through creativity, through their creative process. So I just say yes, I just help people. It's like if I see somebody who wants to do an art show, I will, if a lot of times some people just kind of need a little push to get going, and so I do that. I do the little push to get going, and I follow my interest, what I'm interested in, and basically, ever since I was 11 years old and had a little natural history museum in the backyard, I have followed my interest and tried as much as I could to share them with other people. So that's it. I'm, as I said before, an interfaith minister, and I'd like to facilitate people attaining self-realization, which is when you realize in some way that everything is you, and that everything is connected, so connected, that if you make someone else happy, that's the way to make that's the way to make you happy, because you are that other person in ways that are mysterious. But that's what I think. And so the mothership is about facilitating that process. So the building department shut down the B&B because it wasn't legal. And so I used to do this thing for like 10 years where the weekends would largely get rented out. And so I didn't schedule things for Friday or Saturday nights or or days. So now that the B&B is illegal, I was able to schedule things for all 7 days. I'm 24/7 here now. So I did something I'd wanted to do for a long time. I did a pop-up summer school, and there was programming every day last August, and all of the teachers were Woodstock people who had terrific talents and abilities, so everything from instrument lessons and instrument maintenance to cartooning to using a pendulum, sort of spiritual things, artistic performances. So yeah, I'm into raising the level of conversation. We just had a beautiful program here called A Talking Circle with my sister. I'm adopted Lakota. My sister Gail, 2 eagles, and we sat in a circle and each one of us told the story of a miracle, a really miraculous thing that had happened to them, or an interdimensional thing, a cosmic thing, a mystical thing, but amazing things. And that's one of the things we do here. We're going to have Qigong lessons starting right up again too. So yeah, it's an everything center. It's for what wants to happen, I want it to happen.
Awesome.
For the future, for a long time, I've been toying with the idea of making it a church, declaring it a church, and looking at it as a church. And like I'm still weighing that. It takes me a while to make decisions, but that's one possibility, for it to be a church. Another possibility is for it to just keep going what it is. And what I hope is that younger people, like my daughter's age, like possibly even my daughter's, but other people as well, and of all ages, but focused on young people, that they'll find a use for the place that's a valuable use, like maybe somebody wants to do a sound bath every Tuesday night or something like that. But, you know, something that, or you know, somebody wants to produce a TV show here, or record an album. I want the place to be useful and used, I think, and, you know, so ideas. It's a place to try out ideas. I tried out a lot of ideas. Some of them go, some of them don't go. Like, I thought computer for old people would be a natural. You know, like, everybody's got problems. Like, I'm anxious about trying to check into the state website to pay my taxes. It's like, and you would think, but nobody turned up. I had a young expert here who could handle any question. Nobody came. That happens a lot. It's always happened for me a lot. And there are things that I've done in the past, which when people hear about them, they think that was a huge success. And I can tell you, there was 4 huge failures on the ground. But, you know, doing it is what matters, not what happened. I mean, for some things, for a lot of things.